Welcome to what my current backdrop could look like in 2025 and 2026. How's it going, everyone? I'm Ralph, the Pickleball Tech Dude. I'm an ex-PPA employee, a Harvard-educated engineer, and a seasoned pickleball product tester. Not a lot going on in paddles these days, but I found my old bread and butter paddles in the back of my closet collecting dust. I remember from back in the day when these used to be some of the most fun paddles to play with. Matter of fact, give me just a second. It looks like I have a bit of cleaning up to do. There we go. That's much better. If you haven't heard already, it's being speculated that the United Pickleball Association, or UPA, the umbrella company for the PPA Tour and Major League Pickleball, will be announcing soon that their new global rules and governing organization, UPA-A, will be sunsetting USA Pickleball approved paddles on their tours in 2025 and 2026 and replace this with an annual $100,000 fee per paddle company annually and $5,000 per paddle to certify them on their tours. This essentially brings the cost of certification alone for each paddle company annually from about $7,000 or $8,000 to probably an average of $120,000 annually. So I want to take the rest of this video to direct a message to any representatives of the UPA who might be watching and to you guys as avid pickleball fans and players in terms of what the implications of doing this are for the future of the sport. Dear UPA, the first thing I want to say is that I do understand where the inspiration comes from for creating the UPA-A. You're hoping to increase transparency to us as players because USA Pickleball has done a terrible job of keeping us in the loop with their certification process these past couple of months. You're hoping to centralize information for all pickleball players, both new and old, to know about the rules and the regulations regarding the sport. You're hoping to cut out the cannibalistic brands who just take other companies' paddles and materials and rebrand them for less in order to undercut them. You're looking to create better equipment standards in order to make sure that the sport stays fun and safe and more clear for paddle manufacturers. You're going to establish the PPA Tour as the premier tour in the world. You're going to level the playing field so that players on the tour have more competitive games that are better for the audience to watch. And finally, you want this to be an organization by players and paddle companies for players and paddle companies. But there's one small problem with this. Actually, there's a whole list of problems with this. But first, I'm going to take you through some interesting data. Your equipment advisory board comprises completely of only the biggest and most established companies in the space, including a company literally called United Pickleball Paddles. 80% of the top 20 ranked players on the PPA Tour are sponsored by one of these companies, including Ben Johns and Annalie Waters, respectively the male and female faces of the sport. There is not a single company representing the interests of smaller companies on that board, and on the player board, there is only one player who does not play with a paddle sponsored by one of those companies. Most of your revenue comes from viewership and from sponsors, so there's still no incentive to improve the experience for amateur players, which is currently in shambles. Many of your audience wouldn't know this, but the PPA Tour, MLP, Pickleball Central, Pickleball Brackets, Pickleball.com, and several other companies all fall under the umbrella of Pickleball Inc., which is owned by the same person. 85% of the players on the podium in your tournaments from 2023 up until now have been sponsored by one of these board companies. If you dig deeper into the number of players not sponsored by one of these companies on your board that won gold at one of these 34 tournaments, it happened a grand total of 8 times, which means that a sponsored player from one of your board companies wins 97% of the golds. In women's doubles, there was only one player out of every single women's doubles pairing across the 34 tournaments one time that won a gold medal. So shout out to Megan Dizon back in April of 2023. So keeping the data and facts straight, And knowing that this select group of companies makes up the most sponsorship money from paddle companies on the tour, contributes the most winning players on the tour, and now has a direct stake in the sales and information flow that goes to the public with pickleball, I think we can start to piece together what the problems here are. With regards to transparency, it seems like your board companies are going to receive more leeway in terms of manufacturing standards. It looks like you're using this YOLA lawsuit on USA Pickleball, which is sure to bankrupt them if followed through on, as the launching pad for the UPA-A as the new global organization, but it puts us back at square one with no checks and balances in terms of transparency to the public. When it comes to centralizing rules and information, the USAPA sticker is on thousands of outstanding paddle units and is something that everybody in the industry understands and knows to look for. So by putting UPA-A into the mix, it's going to be a months and years long process probably for the general public to wrap their head around the new rules and organizations. And furthermore, with Pickleball Inc. controlling the entire tour, rules, and information workflow, or at least attempting to do so, that presents a huge conflict of interest by having paddle companies advising the standards. By cutting out cannibalistic brands, I think that's a great long-term vision for the company, but by doing it in this way, imposing such high annual fees, you're going to cut out so many of the small to medium-sized companies that can't afford to pay them. So by cutting them out, you're essentially reducing competition to almost nothing, which means more revenue for the companies on your board who are already large and doing well enough for themselves. And it also means there's less incentive to innovate in terms of paddle technology. And then for the companies that remain in the mix, including your board companies, you're going to cause the price of paddles to increase dramatically. And then the reduction in demand for manufacturing from China due to cutting out the small companies, you're going to raise costs for manufacturing and transportation from China as well, which is only going to magnify that effect of increasing prices to the consumers. When it comes to bettering the equipment standards, I think you are going to be able to achieve that because you're going to learn from the mistakes of USA Pickleball in theory, but you're also only going to be doing that for the big companies that remain in the mix, not everybody else. Creating the best pickleball tour in the world is not going to be feasible when you're only left with the very top pros who are playing with the paddles from the companies on your board. All of the smaller pros, including ones who have taken out your top players, and the amateurs who aspire to be on the tour and keep it competitive, are going to get overlooked and cut out. We always talk about wanting to be different from tennis, but in this way, we inch more and more towards it. We're going to continue to have the problem to an even greater extent of the same pros winning every tournament and only seeing the same 4 or 5 paddles every single time, which is going to become extremely monotonous for the average viewer. You're also not leveling the playing field at all. You're only going to create more influence of sales of paddles in the market, which will then drive even more revenue towards the big companies that remain in competition only, and then you're going to force pros sponsored by small companies to either move over to those big companies, where again will drive more revenue towards them, or you're going to completely cut them because they can't afford to pay your super high tournament fees, which creates even less opportunity for the average person to aspire to be a pro and go compete against the best on the tour, purely from a financial perspective, not a skill perspective. And lastly, by establishing this organization that's supposed to be for players and companies, by players and companies, the way you're going about this is creating an oligopoly of just the biggest companies that sponsor the biggest players at the top. Furthermore, by circumventing USA Pickleball, you're essentially making a precedent for these companies that they're too big to fail when it comes to following the rules, and you're moving the sport, as I explained earlier, towards a place that is a lot more predictable and way less fun. And that's all I have to say, not on behalf of any companies or on behalf of anybody in the public, but just for me, myself, as somebody who understands the space and loves the sport. I believe you have the responsibility to revisit and reanalyze the actions you're about to take, or be more transparent with the people in the public about what the consequences are going to be. Signed, sincerely, Rafa the Pickleball Tech Dude. To those of you still watching, thank you so much for making it this far and for your support. Make sure you like and subscribe if you learned something and you want to stay up to date with everything going on in this situation. And I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.